Black CEO fired in front of everyone. Seconds later, she fired the entire leadership team. The boardroom of Sterling Financial Group had never felt so cold. Naomi Richardson stood perfectly still as Chairman Victor Bennett pointed at the cardboard box on the conference table, his face twisted with barely concealed satisfaction. "Pack your things, Miss Richardson. Your services are no longer required." Naomi was 42 years old, and in her 3 years as CEO, she had transformed Sterling from a struggling regional bank into a powerhouse of ethical finance. She had increased profitability by 170%, expanded services to underserved communities, and won national awards for corporate responsibility. But none of that seemed to matter now. Around the long mahogany table sat the leadership team, 8 executives in expensive suits. Some looked uncomfortable, others wore thin smiles. All of them had their phones out, recording what was clearly meant to be her final humiliation. Victor, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and an air of entitlement that came from old money, stepped closer. "You've been an interesting experiment, Naomi. But our shareholders want traditional leadership, someone who understands our legacy." The words hung in the air, their true meaning obvious to everyone present. Naomi had heard variations of this her entire career. She was too different, too progressive, too much of a risk. The real word they wanted to use was never spoken aloud, but it echoed in the silence nonetheless. "I've tripled your profits," Naomi said quietly, her voice steady. "I've brought integrity back to this institution. I've made Sterling a name people trust again." Victor waved his hand dismissively. "Anyone could have done that with the right market conditions. We need someone with real experience now. Someone who fits our culture." He reached across the table and unpinned the CEO badge from her navy suit jacket. The small click, as it came free, seemed to echo through the room. Then, with deliberate slowness, he dropped it into the small trash bin beside the table. "That's where that belongs," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Now take your box and leave with whatever dignity you have left." Naomi looked around the room at the executives she had mentored, promoted, and trusted. Marcus Chen, whom she had made CFO despite the board's initial resistance. Patricia Webb, who had risen from branch manager to VP of operations under Naomi's leadership. David Foster, who managed their investment division. None of them met her eyes now. The assistant who had brought in the box stood near the door, tears streaming down her face. Jennifer was 25, fresh out of college, and Naomi had been her mentor. She looked like she wanted to say something but was too frightened to speak. "You're making a terrible mistake," Naomi said, her voice calm but carrying a weight that made Victor pause for just a moment. "The only mistake," Victor replied, "was thinking you belonged here in the first place." He gestured to the security guards waiting by the door. "Please escort Miss Richardson from the building. Make sure everyone sees her leave." This was the moment Victor had planned carefully. He wanted her walk of shame to be witnessed, recorded, and remembered. He wanted to send a message about what happened to people who didn't know their place. But Naomi didn't reach for the box. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. With calm, deliberate movements, she typed a single message and hit send. Victor laughed. "Calling your lawyer? They can't help you now, Naomi. You signed an at-will contract. This is perfectly legal." Naomi looked up at him with an expression that made him suddenly uncomfortable. "I'm not calling my lawyer, Victor. I'm activating a plan I hoped I'd never need." Before anyone could respond, the boardroom doors burst open. A woman in her 60s strode in, her presence commanding immediate attention. Behind her came 4 more people, each carrying briefcases and wearing the unmistakable air of serious legal authority. "Nobody moves," the lead woman announced. "My name is Catherine Morrison, and I represent the majority shareholders of Sterling Financial Group." Victor's face went pale. "Catherine? What are you doing here?" Catherine walked to the head of the table, her eyes scanning the room with sharp intelligence. "I'm here because Naomi Richardson sent me evidence 3 months ago that this board has been engaged in systematic discrimination, financial impropriety, and breach of fiduciary duty." She placed a thick folder on the table. "For the past 90 days, my team has been conducting a thorough investigation. What we found is damning." Marcus Chen stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We've done nothing wrong." Sit down, Marcus, Catherine said coldly. We have emails from you discussing how to undermine Naomi's initiatives. We have recordings of board meetings where racial slurs were used. We have documentation of contracts steered to companies owned by board members' family members, all without proper disclosure. She turned to Patricia Webb. We have evidence that you've been accepting kickbacks from vendors in exchange for favorable terms. 37 separate payments over 18 months. Patricia's face drained of color. Catherine continued around the table, listing violations with devastating precision. David Foster had been trading on insider information. Victor himself had been siphoning funds through a complex network of shell companies. The list went on, each revelation more shocking. Gee, than the last. You thought you could hide it, Naomi said, speaking for the first time since Catherine arrived. You thought that because you controlled the board you were untouchable. But I spent 3 years documenting everything, every discriminatory comment, every shady deal, every time you tried to sabotage programs that helped people you deemed unworthy. Victor's hands were shaking. You can't prove any of this. Catherine smiled grimly. Actually, we can. Naomi made sure of that. Every piece of evidence has been verified and is currently being reviewed by federal regulators, the SEC, and the FBI. The security guards, unsure what to do, remained frozen by the door. Here's what's going to happen, Catherine announced. Effective immediately, Victor Bennett, you are removed as chairman. Marcus Chen, Patricia Webb, David Foster, and the rest of this corrupt leadership team, you are all terminated. Security will escort you from the building. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings under supervision. She turned to Naomi. Miss Richardson, the actual majority shareholders, the pension funds and institutional investors who own 62% of this company, have voted unanimously to reinstate you as CEO with expanded authority to clean house and rebuild this institution properly. Naomi picked up her CEO badge from the trash bin. She wiped it clean with a tissue Jennifer quickly provided, then pinned it back on her jacket. I gave you all chances, Naomi said, looking at each former executive in turn. I tried to work with you, to show you that doing the right thing was also good business. But you couldn't see past your prejudices and your greed. Victor tried one last time. The press will destroy you for this. They'll say you staged a coup. No, Catherine interjected. The press will report that Sterling Financial Group's board of directors took decisive action to remove corrupt executives and protect shareholder value. They'll report that you and your cronies are under investigation for securities fraud. They'll report that Naomi Richardson, despite facing discrimination and an illegal termination attempt, chose to stay and fix the institution rather than walk away. Jennifer stepped forward hesitantly. Miss Richardson, I recorded everything that just happened. Just like you asked me to 3 months ago when you first suspected they were planning this. Naomi squeezed her assistant's hand gently. Thank you, Jennifer. Your courage matters more than you know. As security began escorting the former executives out, employees gathered in the hallways, watching in stunned silence. Word spread quickly through the building. The CEO they respected had just dismantled an entire corrupt leadership team in less than 20 minutes. Naomi walked to the window, looking out over the city. Catherine joined her. You know this won't be easy, Catherine said quietly. Rebuilding trust, finding new leadership, dealing with the media circus. I know, Naomi replied, but I've never chosen easy over right. My grandmother used to tell me that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. She cleaned houses for 40 years so my mother could go to college. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse so I could get my MBA. I'm not going to dishonor their sacrifices by walking away when things get difficult. She turned to face the room, now empty except for Jennifer and Catherine. We start fresh. We promote from within, people who've shown integrity. We open up the hiring process, make it truly merit-based. We create accountability measures that actually mean something. Over the next 6 months, Naomi rebuilt Sterling Financial Group from the ground up. She promoted Jennifer to executive assistant and enrolled H in the company's new leadership development program. She brought in diverse talent at every level. She implemented transparent reporting systems that made corruption nearly impossible. The company's stock initially dipped when news of the executive purge broke, but within 3 months, it had recovered and was climbing to new heights. Investors realized that integrity and profitability weren't opposites, they were partners. A year later, Naomi stood at a podium accepting an award for corporate excellence. In her speech, she talked about her grandmother, her mother, and all the people who had been told they didn't belong in rooms of power. "This award isn't mine," she said. "It belongs to everyone who refused to accept that dignity and success were incompatible. It belongs to everyone who chose to build something better rather than accept something broken." In the audience, Victor Bennett watched from his court-mandated community service. He was now working as a financial literacy teacher at a community center, part of his plea agreement. He had lost everything, his position, his reputation, his freedom for a time. But as he listened to Naomi speak, something shifted in him. Perhaps, he thought, there was still time to learn what real leadership meant. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that integrity and courage can overcome even the most entrenched systems of power, please take a moment to like and share this video. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they refuse to accept injustice. And leave a comment telling us about a time when you stood up for what was right, even when it cost you something. Your story matters, and sharing it might give someone else the courage they need. Thank you for listening.